It could be that right now in your life, you are just exhausted. You don't know where to go. You're just at the end of your rope.
This is the Truth Pop Podcast with Jake and Cathy, a Catholic take on faith and culture. Be sure to subscribe.
Hey, welcome to another episode of the Truth Pop Podcast. I'm Cathy.
And I'm Jake.
And we are a married couple giving you a Catholic take on faith and culture, helping you to live out your faith in modern day society.
You know, if that's you right now, where you are just really struggling, it could be a work situation, it could be a problem with your boss, or maybe you're having difficulties with the relationship in your life right now with a friend, family member, your spouse, and you just feel like you've tried in so many different ways to find a solution. The solution could be found with this miracle that Jesus gives us at Cana. We're going to talk about that in this episode. But first, Cathy, really excited about a special Truth Pop Live event that we have in Chicago.
This coming Wednesday, September 11th, Jake and I are going to be speaking about the sacrament of marriage at St. Alphonsus Catholic Church in Chicago, Illinois. We would love if you could come and join us.
And you can get more information at St. Alphonsus Chicago's website, and also get the event information on our website as well at truthpop.net. Would love to see you there. I think, Cathy, one of the things we want to talk about in our talk is, as Catholics, we fall into this idea that marriage is sort of a less than vocation when we're comparing it to religious life, or when we're talking about the priesthood. As we should, we elevate these beautiful vocations of giving yourself entirely to Christ. But at least in my own vocation, there's sometimes, again, that temptation to have the wrong idea of what marriage is. And so we want to discuss that in our talk this Wednesday at St. Alphonsus. And I think there's a real beautiful witness that we see from Jesus in a way that he elevates marriage to such an important degree, because it's where his first miracle happens. And that's, of course, at the wedding feast at Cana. So we want to read you this important part of the gospel and then talk about how it could really help you right now if you're struggling with low self-esteem, or if you're struggling to find that solution in your life. That answer you're looking for may be easier than you think.
So this is John chapter 2, verse 1. On the third day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus and his disciples had also been invited to the wedding. When the wine gave out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, what concern is that to you and to me? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Do whatever he tells you." Now standing there were 6 stone water jars from the Jewish rites of purification, each holding 20 to 30 gallons. Jesus said to them, "Fill the jars with water," and they filled them up to the brim. He said to them, "Now draw some out and take it to the chief steward." So they took it. When the steward tasted the water that had become wine and did not know where it came from, though the servants who had drawn the water knew, the steward called the bridegroom and said to him, "Everyone serves the good wine first, and then the inferior wine after the guests have become drunk. But you have kept the good wine until now." Jesus did this, the first of his signs in Cana of Galilee, and revealed his glory, and his disciples believed in him. I think the beautiful intercession of Mary really comes to my mind, that she's the first one to notice the wine giving out. She is the one who brings it to Jesus's attention.
Yeah. I think that sometimes there's a misunderstanding of what Jesus is really saying to Mary in this moment. And Dr. Edward Tree has discussed this a good amount on his podcast and in some of his talks, how what we forget about is how close and intimate of a relationship Jesus had with Mary. And in some ways, as Dr. Shree explains, that Jesus is protecting Mary because Jesus knows how difficult it would be for Mary to let him perform that miracle. He knows that she's asking him to help those other people at the wedding. But if he were to do that, then he would, in a sense, be exposed as someone who could eventually be crucified. And so Mary, in a sense, is showing her heroic nature as a mother, not only to Jesus, but to all of us, that she's willing to risk her reputation and Jesus's reputation and eventually lead him to the cross just so that that prayer could be answered. And that's a really beautiful witness to us. And I think you're right, babe, that Mary notices. She keeps all things in her heart, and she notices whatever you're going through right now. You know, that pain that is kept hidden in your heart. Maybe that miracle you're asking for. Those relationship problems, that work problem. You might sweep it under the rug and think, no, Jesus can't do anything about this. No one cares. But you reflect on the fact that Mary notices, Mary sees, and she can bring your needs to Jesus. And Jesus is willing to submit to his own mother's request out of love for her and out of love for you, that he can do the impossible. He can work that miracle. He can change water into wine. I think that's a really beautiful reflection for us, that in our deepest, darkest moment of need, Jesus always pulls through.
It is so beautiful how Jesus addresses his mother, because, you know, it might almost seem kind of disrespectful when he says, woman, what concern is this to you and to me? But actually, he is referencing woman as Eve. Woman is a reference to Eve. And so Jesus is basically saying that Mary is the new Eve, and he is to become the new Adam when he dies, thus redeeming us and giving us new life.
And I think it's amazing to think about how Jesus makes that wine so plentiful in the jars, and it's better tasting than the wine in the beginning, right? And I think in our world, we're so conditioned to be cynical, to think, oh, like the good times have gone, right? Like we might have had some good moments up until a certain point, and now the rest of my future is just going to be bitter. It's going to be tough. I'm just going to struggle with that depression. But when we meet Jesus and when we ask him to work that miracle in our life, he gives us that new wine that overflows, and it's a more fruitful life than we could ever imagine. It's a more intimate, close belonging with Jesus, with other people, with ourselves, that we're brought to the fullness of life that we didn't think that we could have on our own. So Jesus wants to bring that new life, that new wine out in you. But what I think he's asking you, in another really important verse in this gospel, is it says that they poured it to the full, right? So in order to make the new wine, Jesus asked them to fill the jar with water to the top of the brim. Jesus wants us to give everything, right? To not just be half-hearted in our sacrifice, in the way that we ask God to be there for us. We really need to give our entire heart, our entire self, and trust that what we bring to the altar, Jesus can fix, that Jesus can really renew, and he can really bring to life what we thought was dead in us.
Yeah, I think, you know, when we really hit rock bottom and we have nothing left to give, that's when Jesus can come in and take over. You know, in my own life, I was very lukewarm for most of my life with my faith. I went through all the motions, but I really kept my faith in a box. And I never really struggled that much growing up. But after I graduated college and started my first job, I was struck with a lot of anxiety and depression for the first time. And I really felt like I was hitting rock bottom. And that's when I decided to turn to my faith, to decide to turn to Jesus, to give me that new life. Because I realized what I had was good. You know, what I had to give was good. I was very self-sufficient. But having Jesus' life inside me, that is abundant. That is excellent. I will never ever have to run out of that. I don't need to hit rock bottom again because I have Jesus sustaining me.
I like that you mention self-sufficiency, because I think that can oftentimes be what prevents us from giving God everything, because we might trust God to a 50% degree marker, but then the other 50% we think is us. And Luke 5, verse 37, this is a different part of the gospel when Jesus says, "No one pours new wine into old wineskins. Otherwise, the new wine will burst the skins, and it will be spilled, and the skins will be ruined. Rather, new wine must be poured into fresh wineskins." And Jesus is calling out the hypocrisy and the legalism from the Pharisees at this point. He's really asking them to stop focusing on the old law and to trust that he can bring something new. And I relate that to my own life, where I think for so long I had this sense of self-sufficiency. My perfectionism got in the way of me really trusting and giving everything to Jesus. And, I struggle with OCD. I struggle with obsessive compulsive disorder. And I get really hard on myself sometimes if I screw up, or if I make a mistake, or if I sin, or if I look bad. And then I, beat myself up, and I think, Jesus doesn't want to meet me here. I have to be perfect. I have to make it look like I have it all together first. Then Jesus will accept me. And in a sense, I think that's the old wine skin. That's the stuff that Jesus wants to take away. Because if I try to let Jesus in with my own self-sufficiency, it's not going to be real. It's not really going to be him. It's just going to be myself, convincing myself that I'm okay. And when we get to that point of our own brokenness, when we see our own limitation, when we realize that we need that new wine to be poured, that's when Jesus can give us the new love in our hearts rather than the old law. So just asking yourself that question, what beliefs, what lies, what sort of script have you been holding on to in your mind? What old patterns of living, what vices, what sins? And Jesus wants to destroy those old habits. That old law doesn't have to be there anymore.
That reminds me so much of Galatians chapter 2, verse 20. I have been crucified with Christ, and it is no longer I that live, but Christ who lives in me. Christ wants to live in you. He wants to work in you and through you. And he can do this when you give your heart to him, when you entrust yourself to him, entrust that situation that is scary, that is hard, that is painful, and you can see Jesus working. Maybe you're at rock bottom right now. Maybe you have no idea what to do next, but surrender that to Jesus, and he can work. He can restore anything. He can create anything. With God, all things are possible. And he can give you that new wine.
This is the Truth Pop Podcast. Fill your faith.